Okay, I want to do a video here on my 1989 Rolex Submariner 16610. I chose this particular vintage or serial. It's a L serial because I wanted to have the lug holes. So I do think that really defines it as a classic vintage Submariner, or sports model. And also I kind of like the I wanted to do a tritium lume so that you can see there's maybe just a slightest bit of creaminess starting in there. But what really attracted me to this particular one, which I got at a brick and mortar store here nearby where I live, is the what has been called the sponge dial. I think John P. at Del Rey Watches defined that, and it's hard to see here, but there is kind of this texture. Let me see if we can zoom in on that. It's a slight, it's starting to go matte is what happens, and so might be easier to see in sunlight, but there's a slight matte surface characteristic that's starting to form, which is nice. It's kind of like a almost like a pebbled surface. Anyway, I wanted to showcase three little mods that are very inconspicuous on this particular Submariner, and so I just wanted to show that. Before I do that, though, I wanted to just highlight another thing about this particular vintage. The date wheel has the old style font, so you can see the open 6 right there, and 17, 18, the open 9s as well, so that's kind of nice. I really like that. And one thing, one of my complaints is that they don't AR coat the underside of the Cyclops in these original, this is the original crystal. At some point I may replace the crystal. There are a couple of minor little scuffs and marks on it. Nothing that ruins day-to-day enjoyment of the watch, but it would give me an excuse to get rid of that glare that you're seeing right here, which sometimes can be hard to see at certain angles, making it hard to see the date. Anyway, so a couple of different mods I've got here that are, like I said, they're pretty inconspicuous. One of them is that I always thought, hey, if I'm not diving, I'd like to have a little bit more functionality and convenience with the rotating bezel rather than it being a unidirectional bezel. I think it'd be kind of cool if I had it turn both ways, like if I'm timing something and if I accidentally went too far, instead of having to go all around, it'd be nice if I can back it up. And so I thought about replacing the standard Submariner click spring with a GMT click spring, specifically the newer one that was on the late 16710s before they swapped over to the 1116 710. And that one had an extra little bend in it, which made it turn just as easily to counterclockwise as it was to turn clockwise. So that was kind of a cool thought. And I did put that in an older 16710 that I had before, and that was fun. But those are sometimes hard to source. So one option was just to remove the click string altogether. So that's what I did. And so there's no clicking. And so I can go both ways. It's very smooth, and it kind of has that vintage functionality that we see in the older models. So that's kind of nice. So you can really, you don't have to worry about the bezel lining up. You can just get it right on the money. And if you're off a little bit, just give it a little squeeze one way or another. Like so. There it is. Okay. So that's one mod. And the second mod is having to do with the case back. I always thought that, man, I wish that the Submariner sat a little bit flatter, kind of like the older generation 1680s or the 5513, 5512s. and those had flatter case backs because they were only 200 meters water resistant. So what I did was I bought a GMT case back. I always thought, hey, you know what? I bet those are interchangeable because I really think the case is exactly the same. And sure enough, I was able to do that. So this is the original. You can see it says 16610. This is the original Submariner case back, and I put on a GMT case back, making the profile a little bit flatter. And so basically, let me put it on the wrist. It sits a little flatter and a little bit more comfortable. And I just don't need that extra 100 meters of water resistance. So I kind of like how that sits. Something that nobody notices but me. But I just kind of like it's a little bit flatter. So there it is. All right, and moving on, while we're working on the clasp here, one thing I wanted to highlight also is that these older clasps, starting from the 16800s and on to the early, just the early 16610s, is they don't have the slash going through the flip over clasp here, the flip over. So that's a sign that you've got the correct vintage clasp to the older model case. So finally, the last thing I did here was I just went ahead and removed the diver's extension. It always bugged me having this older style diver's extension. It doesn't really click in, and then in previous Submariners that I've had, I shelled out some big bucks and bought the updated clasp and swapped it out. But I figured I'm fine with the clasp. It's just the diver's extension I didn't need. So the only thing that I had to do to make that work is I had to get this piece right here. This connector piece came off of a GMT bracelet, 78790, I believe it is, A, 78790A. And so I got that one little piece, which it's basically this link, and this barrel holds the link to that clasp will fit well. And so that worked out very well. So yeah, it reduces the weight a little bit, but the nice thing is I don't have to mess around with that diver's extension. So there it is. That is my 16610. And obviously I don't have to talk about how iconic this watch is. It's wonderful. I've kind of had a tough time holding on to my Submariners for a long time. I started with 16610 LV, which was a V series, and it was brand new, gray market from eBay, and that worked out very well. And then kept that for a little while, and then ended up selling it. And then I later got a later model 16610, which I had to sell it right away because I needed funds. And then finally I picked up a 16800 matte dial, which was beautiful, and that was a mistake to sell, but nonetheless. And then finally, before this one, I had a late model, no date, 14060M, which was great because it had the lug holes just like this one, and it just didn't have a date, but it had the gloss dial. It had 2 lines of text. I had the 2-liner, and that was a great one too. But ultimately, I didn't need a second no date. I'm more of an Explorer guy, so I kind of like my Explorer one. And so I was wearing this more than the no date. And so I figured, hey, you know what? I might as well get one with a date. So I traded up to the date model. And so there it is. All right. Thanks so much. Talk to you later.